It's mandatory minicamp eve here on Orange and Blue today. Forget the Mondays. They've got a case of the minicamps coming up at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit, Mace.
The 3 days that you have to be there. Nobody has to be there for OTAs. It's voluntary, although we often put the voluntary in air quotes, but it really is voluntary. It's something Sean Payton likes to remind everybody of. So guys sometimes have things to do, places to be, etc. But if they're not around for mandatory minicamp, they can be fined. So we're going to pop the top on mandatory minicamp. The 3 days that the Broncos get their last of the offseason work in and really get a little bit of a preview of what's to come in training camp starting toward the end of next month.
All right, let's get into this thing. It is Orange and Blue today. Cecil Lammy, Andrew Mason. 3 things the Broncos must see at mandatory minicamp. First and foremost, 100% attendance, right? Wouldn't you imagine that would be the case?
Well, you obviously want to see that. And I think one person you're going to want to see is John Franklin Myers, who was not out there at the OTAs that we saw. Of course, there's a lot going on there contractually with the defensive line. You've got a bunch of expiring contracts coming up here as we get through 2025 into the 2026 offseason. You've got expiring contracts for John Franklin Myers, Zach Allen, Malcolm Roach. And even though the Broncos are in a pretty good cap position, you can't really see them bringing all of those guys back, especially when they did give DJ Jones the contract earlier this offseason. And also, as we've talked about with Savion Jones, they pick him late in the 3rd round. He's probably going to be part of that rotation, getting some snaps coming up here. And if he develops, he probably ends up getting a prominent role as things go on. So whose job does he take, basically? So always in motion, the future is, as Yoda says. So you can maybe see why JFM was looking to say, hey, after what was probably the best year of his career, maybe he wants a little love contractually, wants, a little reassurance here. But we haven't seen anything get done really yet with these contracts that are still outstanding. Allen, Roach, JFM. And then you go to another line of the defense back. And of course, Nick Bonito, nothing has happened yet with him. Now we're in the window where something can happen if the Broncos want to re-sign Nick Bonito. Now, Bonito's been out there. Zach Allen's been out there. Malcolm Roach has been out there so far. JFM is the one who hasn't been out there.
Right. And we can have a similar conversation about Cortland Sutton, but we'll get to that on a later date.
He has been out there. Cortland Sutton has been out there, of course, and he's been making some plays out there.
Making some plays out there. Not yet paid, which is interesting. We may not have to see that during mandatory minicamp, but what we need to see is the continued progress of Bo Nix to Devaughn Vele, but to everybody, Mace. More of those plays that make you lick your lips and do the chef's kiss. I wouldn't mind seeing those coming up this week over the couple days. And we imagine the 3rd day gets canceled,
Maybe. I don't know. That may end up happening. It depends on the year. But of course, the Broncos had their OTAs trimmed by 1 week, of course, because it's a different offseason. It's a compressed off season, in part because the regular season starts at the earliest possible date, because the regular season, when it starts, it's always connected to Labor Day. The first regular season Sunday is always the Sunday after Labor Day, and Labor Day is on September 1st. So that means everything gets pushed up, including the start of training camp. And OTAs are always structured around when Memorial Day is. So Memorial Day, Labor Day, everything kind of gets compressed. So Sean Payton cut 3 days off of OTAs, but because of that, he may not be inclined to cut the last day of minicamp off as he did last year. So we'll probably find that out later in the week. It may well come down to how well the team plays and or works out the next couple of days and what he sees. If he sees the progress he wants to see, that may be his excuse to say, all right, that's it, we're done. But we're fixing to find out here in what happens. But yeah, you want to see those plays happen. You want to see those connections continue to happen between Bo Nix and Devaughn Vele, Bo Nix and Marvin Mims Jr. The Vele thing is certainly the most interesting because he clearly has taken the next step as being that potential number 2 option behind Courtland Sutton. We've seen some plays from Troy Franklin, and Sean Payton said those plays have been happening also in the practices that we didn't see as well. Only 2 of them have been open to media observation, so we have kind of a limited view, but Payton said those things have been happening in the other practices. What the plays we've seen have had in common, they've largely involved a lot of yardage after the catch. I think what maybe we end up seeing a lot of, perhaps if we get to the regular season, is taking advantage of Troy Franklin's vision, Troy Franklin's ability to weave around players, weave around blocks, take advantage of Devaughn Vele, hopefully improving as a blocker. That's something that he worked on. He talked about studying Lil Jordan Humphrey last year, who was probably the Broncos' best blocking receiver, probably him and Courtland Sutton last year. He talked about studying Lil Jordan Humphrey as a blocker, and we see Devaughn Vele improving in that area, and perhaps that's something that helps Troy Franklin get more yardage after the catch, particularly on those tunnel screen type of plays.
Yeah, short passes, long gains with that deep speed. It sounds like a Troy Franklin specialty. Sith Lords are our specialty.
Oh, boy. Oh, gosh.
I don't get to quote
That's
that one
such
very
a
often.
painful line. Oh, my gosh.
But Ewan McGregor does such a great job in delivering said line.
He does a great job with a bad line. Like, he does it with relish, but it brings to mind the famous
Harrison Ford quote.
You know, George, you can write this bleep, but you can't say this bleep.
Yeah. Well, we can say bleep about the Denver Broncos and the observations that we need to see at mandatory minicamp. Bo growing, Vele continuing to show up and show out. And we're not going to get any answer on running backs. I know we talk a lot about running backs. It's on everybody's mind.
Yeah.
But until we get to live tackling, I can't tell anybody, is Audric Estime the guy? It is something to note, and maybe I shouldn't, Mace, so scold me if you need to.
Oh, boy.
But if he's taking handoffs from Sam Ehlinger and only Sam Ehlinger, I don't like
it's a bad sign.
That. Yeah.
Well, we know Sean Payton usually likes to rotate his guys around, but yeah, like if you see a running back who's basically only working with the third team, that's not a good sign. Which is why when you saw last week, and I point to back-to-back plays toward the end of practice in the passing game, and one is Bo Nix hitting Jaleel McLaughlin out of the backfield for an explosive play, and then the next is Bo Nix hitting RJ Harvey for an explosive play. Both wheel route types of plays. Then, you know, that's something that gives you a glimpse of maybe, all right, where might this thing be going? It's why I know I heard Philip Lindsay on the radio side of our operation talking about this earlier today. And I sort of talk about it as well with Jaleel McLaughlin almost being that guy who's kind of the, you know, maybe not the gadget guy, but someone who's kind of in his own box, his own entity, as far as the running back area. Like he's almost in a competition unto himself compared with the other guys. Like you bring him in for a change of pace, but all these other guys are battling to be behind RJ Harvey, and Jaleel's almost running his own race to be inserted in the lineup whenever you just need to throw a curveball almost.
Yeah. And that's the thing. He can show off that receiving ability.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be Harvey making a play, Jaleel making a play.
Yeah.
Harvey making a play, Jaleel making a play.
Like you get a big play from one and then you put the other in. So you've just chased one around and then you got to chase the other speed guy around. Like
good luck.
Good luck. If you do that, you're kind of giving an opponent nowhere to hide, right? Like if you know, speed upon speed. I mean, Imagine for a moment if you actually put them both out there at the same time.
Shotgun formation, one on each side of Bo.
Ooh, actually think about a package that involved Jaleel, RJ, and Marvin Mims Jr. Troy Franklin. Ooh. You've heard about the NASCAR packages on defense with a lot of speed rushers. How about a NASCAR package on offense with just 4 guys who can fly?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
I'd call it turbo, horsepower,
Yeah.
like something. That's a lot of speed.
Turbo. That's turbo.
That's
a good way to put it. Turbo.
Yeah.
Turbo or nitro boost or something like that.
Yeah, nitro on 3.
Yeah, like you remember when you played Off-Road, that video game, where you drive the nitro boost and you'd fly around.
Are you talking about like Excite-A-Bike or?
No, I'm talking about Iron Man Stewart's Off-Road. You'd go around the dirt track with the trucks and all that.
Yes.
Yeah, and
I was very bad at that game.
You hit the nitro. I was really good. You remember when we were at the arcade bar at the Combine? Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was like playing that for like a half hour straight. And I was basically reliving my middle school years.
You kept getting free plays because you just
because I was awesome at it many years ago, and I'm still awesome at it.
All right. Let's hope the Broncos are as awesome at that or at playing football as you are at that game. And yeah, mandatory minicamp. Everybody's there. There's an excitement, and you don't want to think ahead of the break too much. You know what I mean? That's where Sean Payton needs to see that effort. And the nice thing is for the media, it is open, full practice, all 3 days that are scheduled.
Yes. So we get to see every snap, everything. Get a glimpse. Get to see some, maybe not narratives develop, but you get to see kind of the trends over the 3 days, right?
Right. Maybe some early training camp kind of inclinations.
Well, one of the things they do is usually like the first install that they get to in training camp. Usually they work on it at minicamp, and then they repeat it when they get to training camp to just kind of get everything squared away. So usually this is a preview of what we see those first 3 days when they come back, just to get everything down pat when they're getting all the basics of the offense and defense done. So it's a good thing to kind of establish a foundation for what you're going to install and what you're going to do conceptually going forward. So this is also a thing where you sort of, with the rookies as well, you kind of get a sense of who's picking things up quickly, who's, struggling a little bit. Like take Jahdae Barron, for example. Sean Payton's already talking about how he's working him inside, he's working him outside, and he's picking things up quickly, which I don't think it's a surprise, but it's good to see that he's actually living up to the expectations, admittedly high, but the expectations they had on him, that they did the study of him, they put in the work on him, they knew what he was intellectually capable of, and that they get him in there, they get him on the field, they get him in the classroom, and he's able to handle all that immediately. So the juice is proving worthy of the squeeze, but the reality is matching the hype. Actually, that's a better analogy. The reality is matching the hype, and they open the present, and it's everything that they dreamed it was going to be so far in terms of how he is able to learn and process things. And that probably augurs well for just how he's going to be used going forward in terms of the extent of how he's going to be used.
Yeah, extent of how he's going to be used and what kind of role he can have for this Broncos team. Also, our chat room, I think it was Sharon. What's up, Sharon? She had asked first about J.K. Dobbins with the Nick Chubb number coming through. And correct me if I'm wrong, up to $5 million with incentives. Up to $5 million. Does that change the number for Dobbins? These guys were looked at similarly. So I think Sharon asked, like, hey, would they still bring in Dobbins? Well, mandatory minicamps tomorrow. I don't forecast that happening, or we would have heard something by now. Maybe before
I don't
training
know.
camp.
Sometimes these things happen pretty quick if they go down.
All I know is Mike Kliss is in a dumpster at Centennial Airport, and I got him on speed dial, so I kid. I always kid Mike about hiding in the dumpster at Centennial. But either way, like, does the Chubb number one? It was very surprising to me. It just came together, materialized, and that has to change the Dobbins number by quite a bit. If it's 2.5 million, and the Broncos may or may not have offered 1.6 million, which is what the tender is for Dobbins.
Yeah.
That's a chunk of change.
Well, probably has to be 2.5 million on Dobbins, does it not? Because he's got an injury history, but it's not as severe, at least recently, as Chubb. And he's also a little younger. I mean, Nick Chubb turns 30 in December. Nick Chubb came into the league in 2018. Dobbins came into the league in 2020. So you'd have to say that even though Chubb is the more productive back, on balance, I would say at minimum, J.K. Dobbins, 2.5 million base, just like Nick Chubb with incentives. I'd say at minimum, you're talking about the same type of contract, 2.5 million for a year, up to 5 million in terms of incentives. Are you willing to
Dobbins would
pay
be
that?
in more line to get those incentives. You know, if
Yes.
Joe Mix is healthy, there's really not much for Chubb to do except a couple carries a game as a breather. I mean, if Dobbins is here with incentives, depending on what they are, like he could get those incentives.
Yeah. Are you still doing it, or are you just going to wait and see?
That's the market. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm not against paying market prices if that's what the market is. It was surprising to me though that Chubb would get that and with those incentives, because it's like, wow, that changes the structure for Dobbins. You know, not less so for a Jamal Williams or whatever, not on that same level, but Chubb and Dobbins were thought of as the same thing. And maybe in mandatory minicamp, you know, God forbid any sort of fumbles or anything like that. Throwing interceptions is okay in practice. Fumbling is never okay. Ever.
I mean, throwing interceptions can happen because you're testing the limits of what your receivers can get to, what they need in terms of the window. Can they get a pass in a tight window, or do they need a little bit more space? There's never a circumstance where a fumble is okay. Never. I mean, there is a circumstance where a fumble is the same as a turnover on downs. That's like fourth down, you're trying to stretch and get the first down. Think back to that Seattle game in 2022 where Melvin Gordon's trying to stretch for a fourth down there in the second half, and he doesn't get it. But that's like, okay, it's fourth down. It's a turnover on downs. If he doesn't get it anyway, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But aside from that, a fumble's never good.
No.
And especially when you have a history of fumbling. Like, the thing that'll make everybody watching practice this week say, oh no, is if Audric Estime puts the ball on the ground. That's the thing that's going to make everybody gasp on the sideline, I assure you. As for J.K. Dobbins, I mean, look, if you don't get him, now that Nick Chubb is off the market, I mean, what's left at running back on the open market? It's a drop off. I mean, there's Jamal Williams, but he's a drop off from J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, he's not what he used to be when he had like 20 touchdowns that one year for Detroit.
Yeah. The gap is after J.K. Dobbins. So it was like Nick Chubb and J.K. Dobbins, and then there's the gap. Everybody else that's left is supplemental contingency plan type of running backs, right?
Honestly, of what's left,
Chase Edmonds, it's Dearness Johnson, it's
Cam
Amir
Akers
Abdullah. Yeah, these are, they're just guys, basically. These are guys that may be landing on practice squads as veterans during the season. Now, Mike Boone, a familiar name from a few years ago around here. These aren't guys you're talking about as RB1, 1A, even RB2 types. Unless
the way we talked about Chubb and Dobbins.
Yes. That's what I mean. Like, this is it. Like, Dobbins is the last guy now. Like, he's the last man standing there. When he's gone, that's it. So it actually, I mean, Dobbins kind of has all the negotiating power here because he's it. If a team wants a viable running back who can be at least a number 2 in a 1-2 partnership, a veteran, proven guy for that role, and they don't want to make a trade, if you want to sign somebody on the open market, he's it. Because, again, it's a significant drop-off after that in terms of quality of running backs available. This is it.
What a difference a couple of days makes.
Yep.
And the conversation changing. Honestly, Mace,
No
what I would
doubt.
do, and Jamal is a buddy of mine, so I'll always have a soft spot for Jamal Williams.
That's the thing. You talk him up. You do talk him up a lot, but unfortunately,
he's not what he used to be.
Production is declining. He's on the wrong side of 30.
What I would do if that was all that was left, if Dobbins goes somewhere else, I would wait until Taj Brooks is cut, Devin Neal is cut, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is cut. Although Krosky-Merritt's standing out in Commander's camp is the buzz.
No surprise.
None whatsoever. But if these teams get cute and try to do some practice squad stuff, I'm scooping those guys up.
Yeah. Waiting for just one of those guys. But the problem is the Broncos don't have a high waiver claim priority. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Broncos might want him, but there are, 19 other teams that if they want him too, well, the Broncos are SOL. It's the only bad thing about being good. That's why I say if you had a bad year, and the Broncos have had quite a few of those years, unfortunately, up until last year, I always say take advantage of that waiver claim spot after cut downs and just make a bunch of claims. Take advantage of that. I always thought the Broncos didn't quite take enough advantage of that over the years, but that was just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens at mandatory minicamp. Before we wrap up today's show, Mace, anything more specific you want to get to? We're looking at Vele, looking at Bo, these running backs, JFM will be out there. Anything under the radar you're thinking about?
I always talk about the edge rushers the last 2 weeks because I've seen Dondrea Tillman and Q Robinson both flash. So let's see if we see more of them. Savion Jones had some moments last week. Let's see if we see more from him. But we get a little bit better inkling from the edges. They're able to show their speed. And boy, Q Robinson flashing that speed, flashing that length off the edge, being able to take advantage of the long arms that he's able to use in those matchups for the tackles. We'll get a better understanding as the pads go on, but the signs we're seeing so far from Q are pretty impressive getting in there. And it's going to be real interesting when Jonah Ellis gets back in that mix. You're talking about having these 3 young guys, a rookie and 2 second-year guys in Q Robinson, Jonah Ellis, and Dondrea Tillman, all 3 very promising edges, giving the Broncos some very nice depth there. I expect they're going to carry 5 edges on this roster going forward. And I think there's a very good chance all 5 of those edges are active because you're going to see Q Robinson be a pretty big factor on special teams as well. It's going to create a little bit of a shift in how the game day roster is structured. But yeah, I expect we'll probably see Q Robinson flash again next 3 days.
Yeah. It's happened twice. Should happen again, and you'll be there to witness it all. And then I'll get your notes.
Okay. I'm sorry you're not going to be out there, but yeah, I'm going to have to take notes for you at training camp as well, aren't I? If you're going to be on the air during practice.
Well, hopefully commercial breaks, get to see something. At least I'll be there, right, in a tent.
Yeah, presumably so. Yes, that'll be good.
Yeah.
In the arena.
We'll see if fans are going to be allowed. I'm not sure yet. You've probably heard more than I.
Yeah, they're making every effort to find a way to have at least a few hundred fans there. Somehow, some way. It's going to be interesting. Like that's because it is a construction zone this year, but they're working to find a way to make that happen. So at least they're not going to West Virginia. That was what I was worried about.
Sean getting his way. We are building our YouTube channel, and we appreciate Orange and Blue for leading the way and this audience for helping to lead the way. The Broncos talk, the Broncos coverage that Mason and I bring to you here on YouTube. We appreciate that y'all have responded as such. So to help us out, Mace, further, how can folks continue to do that?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell
so that you
never
miss vid. That's right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammy saying OBT's BFD. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned, and would you please stay frosty,